Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jenna, and I'm the head of adult services at Evergreen Park Public Library. And I have with me today author Kathleen Rooney. And Kathleen has been here before. You were, well, not here, but you were with us on Zoom in 2020. And you are the national best-selling author of, I have the books right here, Lillian Boxfish Takes a Walk, and also the novel Cher Ami and Major Whittlesey, among other works, lots of other works. Your latest novel, From Dust to Stardust, is out now, and unfortunately for me, I couldn't get my hands on it, which is a good thing. We want the books to get checked out. There it is. Kathleen is a founding editor of Rose Metal Press, as well as a founding member of Poems While You Wait, which I want to know more about that. That sounds really cool. It's a team of poets who compose commissioned poetry on demand. Kathleen also teaches in the English department at DePaul University. Her latest poetry collection was chosen for the X.J. Kennedy Prize. And I could go on and on and on about your many accomplishments, but we only have a short amount of time. So Kathleen, please introduce yourself. And obviously, we don't want to give too much away in advance, but tell us a little bit about your latest novel and what you're hoping folks will get out of your visit on December 14th.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me now and on December 14th. I will be talking about From Dust to Stardust, which I think sort of like the quick elevator pitch version is that it's the true story behind the woman who A Star is Born was based on. I think a lot of people don't know that that story comes from the silent era. And so the woman who, in my book, is Doreen O'Dare, is based on Colleen Moore, who was a super big kind of flapper style star in the 20s. And then I think people in our area might know that she went on to build the Fairy Castle, which is the 1-ton beautiful, just like stunning jewel encrusted dollhouse at the Museum of Science and Industry. And then she kind of built that as talkies were coming in and as her marriage was breaking down in a very like stressful and unfortunate way. And so once she completed the castle, it was the Great Depression, and she wanted to do something for people's spirits and then also materially. So she took her castle on a tour, and she did this cool thing where, instead of just like throwing some of her money at the problem, she got kind of like buy-in from the community. So she would go town to town and show the castle, and people would pay their dime to go look at it. And all of that would add up to like a lot of money for the individual communities. And I don't know, I think it's so cool. I think there's so many Hollywood stories, which are fascinating, where they're like, an ambitious person goes to Hollywood, rises to the top, and then it's that like old kind of retro VH1 behind the music thing where it all falls apart and then they crash and burn. And I think that's fascinating. But what I think I was attracted to Colleen for, and what I'll talk more about, is how she got there. She became super successful. And then she walked away. She left and did not just like a second act, but a third act. And I'll get into all that on the 14th. So I think that's hopefully enticing.
That is definitely enticing. So the castle is at the Museum of Science and Industry, like you mentioned. How many times have you visited it?
Incalculable. I mean, I started going when I was 8, and it's weird. I mean, I think, museums are full of wonders. And I think, to your point about what I hope people will get from the book, it's that sense of wonder, or what makes us wonder as a verb and feel wonder kind of as a noun. And there's so many great things in the Museum of Science and Industry, but for whatever reason, the castle just obsessed me from the time I was in elementary school on. And so when you love something, you want other people to love it. So I would always take my friends and, relatives who would visit from out of town, my niece and nephew, anybody who would indulge me, I would take them to go see it. And so I think that's kind of why I ended up writing about not just the castle, but the person who created it.
Yeah, because I'm sure like people can see the castle, but
Yeah.
they don't, there's information about
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
This is kind of a deeper dive
Yes.
almost. Awesome. What interested you about this period in history to write this book,
Yeah.
besides castle as a young kid?
Yeah. I think, now I've written like 3 books that are kind of at least partly set in the 20s, including the ones you held up at the beginning. And I think the 20s are sort of a time where nowadays I think we sort of think of flappers as like a fun Halloween costume. You put on like a headpiece and some fringe and like, haha, you're a flapper. But I think people don't realize how cataclysmic the social change in that era was. It wasn't just the roaring 20s, but it was a time of sort of like huge gains that women were making, especially younger women. I mean, I think that came through in Lillian Boxfish, which is about the highest paid female advertising copywriter in the world in the 30s. But of course, she began her career in the 20s. And then I think, one of the things that I loved in my research was looking back and seeing how the flappers weren't just, people who did the Charleston all the time, but they were young women who like got rid of their corsets and who like, got their own checkbooks and who would kiss men who they wouldn't
So
marry.
progressive.
I know, which nowadays is sort of like quaint, but at the time, I mean, when you really think of how repressed women were, I mean, it's hard to overstate what a like seismic shift in culture the flapper represented. So I like that Colleen and therefore my Doreen kind of got to push that envelope.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't want to give too much more away about the book. But let's move on to you. What are you currently reading?
Well, right now, I should have grabbed it. It's in the other room, but I do, you probably won't be surprised, like things that have a historical basis. I think, many people love a based on a true story. It's fun to read like a fictional imagining. So I'm reading this book called Milton in America by Peter Ackroyd, who hopefully people know. He's an amazing British historian and novelist, and he wrote a massive tome about London that's kind of like the definitive, history of London as a city. And he has this like treasure trove encyclopedic knowledge of not just like the big bird's eye view events of like kings and queens and wars and nobles, but of like the street level view of, the slang that, poor people would use in certain neighborhoods of London. And so he has this great premise where, John Milton, who wrote Paradise Lost, goes to America, which is something that apparently Milton was thinking of doing. Because I think, again, I don't know if people know, but in addition to writing Paradise Lost and like being blind, these things people know about Milton, he was an anti-monarchist. He was like a radical person in his politics who believed that, England should not have a monarchy. And so he got in a lot of trouble during, the English Civil War for the sides he had taken. And so trouble to the point where it looked like he might get executed. He didn't. And, in the end, in real life, he stayed in England and it was fine. But for a minute, he thought, like, what if I have to go to the New World to escape my death sentence? And so Ackroyd just found this fact and was like, okay, let's say he did go, though. And so it's a lot of fun to see him take his knowledge and apply it to what life would have been like in the colony, that was America in like the 1600s. So that's what I'm reading. I recommend it.
Awesome. And you're a writer, you're a best-selling writer. Do you have any advice for any aspiring writers? Because we're still in National Novel Writing Month, 4 days, and I'm sure people are kind of wrapping up. But what kind of advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I think my spouse Martin C is a writer too. His novel is The Mirror Thief, which I recommend, and he studied with another writer named Fred Lebron. So credit where this is due. This is where I'm just like taking Fred's advice. And he has this funny saying, but that's also very profound, where he says, writing is a game of attrition, don't attrit. And of course, writing is hard. Like it's hard on a day-to-day level where you're just sitting down trying to get the work done. But it's even harder, I think, for a lot of people when they get to the point of trying to, find an agent, find a publisher, that sort of thing, like get your book out into the world. And so I think a lot of people quit at that point. And it's understandable, sometimes it's too hard and it's not good for you. But I think believe in yourself and don't give up. Like, I think, everybody has their stories of how, this thing got rejected 100 times. And then on the 101st time, they got through. And that's basically what happened with Lillian. My agent had sent it around. I got tons of nice rejections. Everyone, I think a common rejection is like, this is awesome, we don't want it, and you're just like, why? And then one woman, Hope Dellen, who, RIP, she died a few years back, which is a tragic loss to the publishing world, but it was that thing where I'd been rejected everywhere, and then Hope read it and she loved it. And it's thanks to her. I mean, she changed my life. She's, this book that I'm coming to talk about is a fairy tale, and Hope was one of my fairy godmothers where, I wouldn't have a bestseller. Lillian Boxfish wouldn't exist if she hadn't believed in it. So I think hopefully that, tells people like it's so subjective and it's all luck. You have your skill, but it's just sort of like, it only takes one person. So don't give up.
I love that advice. That's amazing.
Thanks.
Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us. And everybody else, I hope that you can join us too on Thursday, December 14th at 6:30. Please register in advance so we know to anticipate you. You can register by visiting evergreenparklibrary.org. We have an events calendar. Or you can call the library at 708-422-8522 and register over the phone. We're happy to talk to you and help you with that. We will have books available thanks to Bookies Bookstore here in Chicago, close by. So Kathleen will be signing books at the event thanks to Bookies.
Yeah, and I have stamps. I don't know how well you can see them, but I have little fairy stamps.
Oh, that's amazing.
One more. Etsy is wonderful. And I have these little fairies carrying a lantern. So if it's an incentive, I won't just sign it, but I will stamp.
Stamp as well. That's even better.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so
Kathleen,
much.
thank you again. We will see you on Thursday, December 14th.